Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Daniel Zana. I'm on the Power Platform community team, and I'm a video producer. And welcome everyone to Power BI Dev Camp session 13, developing in Salesforce with Power BI embedding. We're here with the great Ted Pattison, and I'm going to pass it over to Ted, who will explain a bit more about what that means. Ted, take it away.
Thanks very much, Daniel. Hope everyone's doing well today. So episode number 13, that means we completed our first year. Now we're starting our second year. And so a little bit of a niche topic today. We're going to talk about, people who work in Salesforce and also have Power BI, and how do we stand up our Power BI, reports in a Salesforce environment. Okay, a couple things I want to throw out there. First of all, Power BI Dev Camp has a portal that you can go to and get information about upcoming sessions. You can also get links from past sessions and also kind of get a quick way to get to the videos of past sessions. We record these sessions, and within about a week or so, we get them posted to the Power BI channel in YouTube. So whether you see it live or you see it after the fact or a little bit of both, we'd like to make that available to you. Next thing I want to point out is that we have some developer sample code that I'm going to show, and all the sample code, is going to be available to you. If I move over here for a second, the first solution we're going to look at is a relatively simple single page application, and all the code, if you want to download it and kick its tires, are available here at the one URL, and we're going to put that, in the chat window for you. There is a second solution, which is a lot more involved because it uses the Salesforce Developer Experience platform to basically build a professional dev level solution for app-owns data embedding. Okay, so once again, I just wanted to give you the links so that you can get to them after the fact. What we're going to do now is we're going to start with just an overview. I've got my Power BI report. I want to surface it in Salesforce, and what are my options? And we'll see there are three options, and then the next three sections, we'll just step through each one of those options. Okay, now, when it comes to dealing with Power BI in Salesforce, there's kind of two roads. There's the quick, easy road, which to some degree, you might not get help from the people that manage the Salesforce environment. We might just want to use a way that we can just stand it up. And so what we're going to do is we're going to first of all use the out-of-the-box secure embed feature. We won't spend too long on it, but it's one of the first options, so we want to see it. Second thing we can do is create a simple single-page application, which basically is written in JavaScript and authenticates, as a user. So we're going to use user owns data embedding for this. And while it has more development in it, once again, when we get to Salesforce, we're just going to go to a visual force page and put in an iframe. And there's no need to kind of configure things over on the server side or deploy any code. Now, those will be great for departmental level solutions. The larger something gets, the more likely you're not going to be able to use the easy approach. So the last thing we're going to look at, is a professional developer level solution created using the Salesforce Developer Experience, or Sfdx. And so this is something, if you're an independent software vendor, if you are creating more of an enterprise level application in Salesforce that's going to be used by thousands of users, it's a lot more likely you'll be forced to go down, this road, to kind of create a developer solution, that the people that build Salesforce and build the developer experience, are going to say that this is going to run, it's going to scale, it's going to be very secure. Okay, so once again, what we're going to do is we're going to look at three different approaches. Now, the first one, we're just going to use an out-of-the-box feature, so it's not really development, and I'm not going to take very long. I just want to cover this so you have a starting point to compare when we get to the two developer efforts, how hard those ones are going to be. So the first one is going to be very simple. The second one, creating an SPA shim for user-owned data embedding, will be relatively simple. And then when we get to the last one, it's going to be, a lot more moving parts. It's going to require a much a much more advanced style of development. And we're not going to spend much time on the first one. We'll spend most time on the second two. Okay, so let's look at surfacing reports with Secure Embed. And the idea of Secure Embed is that Power BI, will give you an iframe to copy and paste into any place that you can basically copy and paste code, into a web application. So the idea is that when we use this, what we're going to see, is that every time you come to the page with the iframe, the user has to sign in. The user is going to click the sign in button, and once the user signs in, they will see the report. There's some things about the user interface experience we wish were a little bit better, such as the page navigations on the bottom that can't be changed. It's going to show the filter pane in a collapsed state. But once again, the reason you'd like to use this is the easiest way. Let's kind of take a quick look at that. So let's say that I have this report in Power BI. So I'm just going to go to the Power BI service. I'm going to open the report. And then, what you'll see is that if we go to the file menu and we go to embed report, I can take publish to web, and that's going to expose it to everybody in the world. That's not what I want to do. I want to have security. So I'm going to pick website or portal. Now that brings up this little dialog, which you can either take a single URL, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the iframe right here and say, now that I've got that, let's go over to Salesforce. And so here we need the ability to create visual force pages. This is kind of the old legacy style. But once again, if you're looking for an easy approach, what we might find that we want to do, and before I post this in, I find that we'll start just kind of putting by some starter code for the page. I'm just going to say standard style sheets equal false. So I have kind of more control over how the HTML is going to be laid out. And then I'm just going to take what I copy and pasted from Power BI, and let's go ahead and paste that in. And so now that we have this iframe inside here, let's go ahead and notice that you get to adjust the width, you get to adjust the height. Also, there is a source, and here you don't really have to play around with that if you don't want to. If I go to the very end here, just to kind of show, what things look like here at the end, there is the border. Do I want to allow full screen? And I can set those. And so now let's just go ahead and save our work. And I have to give the page a name. So we'll just say test page and then test page. And so now that I've created this test page right here, let's go ahead and save our work. And now I'm just going to go ahead and click on the preview button right here. And now my page is up and running. Okay. And then once again, one of the issues that I want to point out is, one, we don't really have control over how the navigation menu is shown. Always shown on the bottom, and it's always going to show the filter pane. And one more issue is let's go ahead and close the browser. Let's open the browser back up, and so let's go back to that test page right there. And as I go back to the test page, it's always going to make you sign in again. So basically it can cache credentials across a session of the browser, but it doesn't persist anything. So one of the issues that some people have with it is that users have to click the sign in button all the time. Okay, now a couple things that you can do if you're using Secure Embed. And one is, let's say you have a report that has several pages, but you don't want to go to the main page. You want to go to one of the other pages. So, there is a way to do that by putting the page name inside there. How do you find that page name? And, the trick for finding the page name is if I navigate, to that report, and notice that here at the very end, you can see a page name. So if I went to sales by state, and what you'll see is that page names are fairly arbitrary. but if you just navigate to that page with the report in the service, you can copy and paste that. And once again, you're able to put that page name in if you wanted to, go to a page that wasn't deemed as the default landing page. Secondly, and this is something that people use a lot, is you can also use a query string parameter named filter. And so there's an example of using filter. And then finally, what you can see here is, let's say I want to do something a little bit more advanced with my filtering. So there's the ability to go in there and, filter customers only in a couple different states. So let's say that, now as I go back here, and I'm now going to go back, and if I go to Visualforce pages, and now if I go to my secure embed 2, and go to edit, what you can see right here, here's the customers, and here are the states I want to look at. Here are the different years. Let's go ahead and preview that work. And once again, if I want to, filter on some column or multiple columns and tables, you can just do that, with those URLs. Okay, so that kind of concludes, our first topic. And as I talked about, it was pretty simple. It's got a couple configuration options, and a couple things I want to call out is that you always have to log in at the beginning of a browser session. So it will not cache credentials or give you any type of single sign-in. Secondly, the filter pane is going to be shown in a collapsed state, so you can't hide the filter pane if that's something you'd like to do. And then the other issue is that it uses the older page navigation style. Now, just a quick look. If I go back to my Power BI report, and note that, a while back, Microsoft or Power BI changed its default navigation to be on the left. And, if you go into edit mode, then you can see them on the bottom. But once we kind of get out of edit mode and we go back into, regular view mode, what we're going to see is that it's going to put the, basically the navigation, back to where it was before. So, excuse me. One other thing to note is the left navigation is smarter than the navigation on the bottom. Let me go back to the slide and kind of talk about what I mean. What happens if you have a report that has a single page? When the page navigation is on the bottom, it still shows you the navigation, but you can't navigate anywhere because you only got one page. So when you move to the left navigation scheme, as we're going to do in a second, what's nice about that is that if you don't have more than a single page that's showing, it basically just gets rid of the menu and gives you basically more horizontal real estate. Now, the next thing that we're going to look at, is creating an SPA shim for user owns data embedding. Now, the way that we're going to do this, is by writing single page application means everything lives on the client. So for this sample, I've tried to kind of keep the code as simple as possible. It's about 100 lines of JavaScript that's going to allow us to authenticate and then to be able to, implement user owns data embedding. Now, why do we do this? Because it's going to provide a lot more control than using the secure embed feature. So for instance, if you use secure embed, the user is always going to see the Power BI logo when the report is loading and before they log in. But now, because you're doing custom development, you can use what we call white label loading. We want to hide the Power BI brand and replace it with, our own custom images and our own custom animations. Okay, that's number one. Two, I want to control page navigation. Maybe I want to hide the page navigation because I have bookmarks for users to navigate from one page to another. Also, we're going to be able to switch it from, if we want the page navigation, from the bottom to the more modern left navigation pane. Okay, another thing, I might want to control the filter pane. So I have complete control whether I show it or hide it. And if I show it, is initially in the expanded or collapsed state. Okay, also, I can bring up the bookmarks pane. So if I have reports and we've kind of spent some time creating bookmarks and our users like using those, we can just show the bookmarks pane. We're able to also show something which is called an action bar. So we'll see that in just a second. Now, another thing that you can do with the single page application is you can cache login credentials across sessions. Because when we do this, what's going to happen is it's going to cache it in browser in persistent storage and cookies. Now, note that before you get too excited, that when we use the most modern Microsoft authentication library for single page applications, they give us the ability to cache credentials, but only for 24 hours at a time. You'd have to use a server-side technology, and a lot more advanced development, to kind of get your credential storing, your refresh tokens, to last beyond this 24-hour period. Now, in order to configure this, first thing we're going to have to do, is we're going to have to find a place to publish your application files where they're accessible through, basically HTTPS, basically TLS. And let's say that I've created an Azure website, and we'll basically call it, Salesforce user owns data app.azurewebsites.net. So you need a place that you can post your files. Secondly, we're going to create an Azure AD application, and we're going to configure this location of the individual pages where we need authentication as reply URLs. Next, we're going to take these application files, and there's only one you need to update, which is the app.js file, and it's a pretty generic solution. So you're going to have to open up the app.js file, and after you've created the Azure AD application, you're going to have a client ID, and there's the name of your tenant, and we're going to add those in there. We'll see those in just a second. After that, you're going to upload the application files, to whatever your published location is. And then what's kind of interesting about this is that you're going to be able to test it before you even put it into Salesforce.com. Now, just as an example here, what you can see here is that I've got a couple, different examples that I want to show. So you're going to have, basically a app.js file. So here I have SPA1, and the code is going to live, down here. But all you really have to do is change two things. What is your client ID and what is your tenant ID? Now, excuse me. One other thing that you're going to see, is if I want to test the application, I might want to test the application, against a local path. So as I register my reply URLs, here I've kind of put one with localhost so I can do development work, and I'm going to do some other ones. So let's say that we go to Azure AD. And so what we need to do, is we need to create a new application. And once again, we get to the, main Azure AD applications page. So you or someone, is going to need to have, okay, let me see if I can get this page back up. Here it comes. So when we go to Azure AD, you're going to need to have, permissions, which if you have a trial tenant, you might have automatically. The larger the company, the more likely the IT department, might need to give you permissions or do this task for you. But we're going to go to app registrations. We're going to create a new app, test SPA app. And the idea is it's very simple because all you really have to do is create the app. And here we're going to keep it simple. Accounts in this organization directory only. Technically it is possible to do B2B, but here let's just say we want to have users inside of our particular company directory. And then we're going to pick single page application. This is fairly new. It came online over the last year. And the idea is that it gives you a more secure way to authenticate the user in a single page application that's all JavaScript. Now, you would have to kind of figure out, what are the URLs, that you are going to be, basically running these pages from. And so what you're able to do is register the app. And at this point, we have the application ID. And also notice that your Azure AD tenant, has an identifier, and you can either use the GUID, or you could use the domain, mycompany.onmicrosoft.com. Now, one other thing I want to show is that when you create one of these SPA applications, you have redirect URIs, and you're not limited to one. For instance here, if I look at the application that I've been working on and that I have been testing, let's go down here and find that. And now I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to go to the authentication tab. So basically any page, where you need to authenticate the user from, is going to need to, have this inside there. Now, the way things work here is, let's do something interesting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the tools here. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go to the developer tools, and under developer tools, let's go to application. And now we can look at local storage. Now, let's say that I take these, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete all these so we can kind of see, what happens, the first time, you come to one of these particular pages. And let's go ahead. And what you can see is it brings up the sign-in button. Now, my sign-in button is very plain, but you can, create the sign-in button however you want. And you certainly don't need to put the Power BI logo on it. Now, what's going to happen is the user is going to sign in. And, in this case right here, there was enough residue, inside the browser to automatically authenticate. Let's try one more thing here. I'm going to do a Control, Shift, and Delete, because I want to clear all the data from that domain inside there. And so now that I've done that, let's go ahead and do a refresh one more time. But here what you can see is the typical experience will be a user will click your sign-in button. The user will be presented, with, the typical Microsoft sign-in page, and after they sign in, and it looks like I have some kind of issue there that I forgot to put the SPA1 inside here. Okay, it looks like I don't have a the right URL inside there for that. If let's see if I can quickly get my way out of this little problem here. Now, what I wanted to do is kind of take you through these steps. So, one step is that we created this application. And then you have to put in, the redirect URIs. And if you only have one page and you're just worried about deployment, there'll be one URL, but there'll be a different URL if you're developing in Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. Now, another thing to point out about this sample is it uses a modern Microsoft library, which is the Msal Browser Js. And that's the one that, basically uses a single page application for redirects. Now, if you look at the sample code, you'll see that it only has a couple files in it. It has a loading.gif image, because that's going to be what we replace the Power BI logo with. It's got app.css with just a handful of CSS styles. It's got app.js where all the programming logic is. And then it has index.html. There's the scripts folder. So what are the third-party libraries that we're using? And we're using jQuery. We're using Msal-browser. So that's the Microsoft authentication library for single-page applications. And then we're using Power BI.js, which is the Power BI JavaScript API, which is required on the client. So the idea is that we're going to simply open up app.js and basically swap out the client ID and the tenant ID. And, at that point, we should be able to run it. Now, the other thing to note is that when you run this, we didn't want to create a single app for each report. We wanted to make it configurable. And ultimately, you're going to add this report into Salesforce using an iframe. And so to make things flexible, we have one app, and at the end of the app, you include the report ID. And the idea is once you have the report ID, you pass that to the code, and it's able to figure out what report to load. Note that if you try to look at one of these pages and you don't have the report ID, it's basically going to show an error. If I wanted to do a quick test of that, here is the code, as it's deployed. And, what we can see here, is that it runs, and I see that things, on the side inside there. However, if I went and I took the report ID and, now we try to have that, the code just basically tells you that it can't continue, until you put a valid report ID inside there, and once you do, it's able to open things up. Now, let me just kind of step through some of the things that we're kind of demonstrating here. So first of all, let's say that it's time to embed a report. And one of the things, that I don't like, is that bottom navigation. So we're going to say navigation left. Also note that, here you see that there is the filters, and do you want to show the filter panel? You have control to hide it or show it. If you decide to show it, you have the ability to kind of bring it up in either a expanded or collapsed state. Okay, and so what's going to happen here? And you can see that now we've embedded and we've gotten the left navigation and we have complete control. Okay, now going a little bit further here, let's say that you'd like to, do the white label loading. So what I want to point out here is that we have an image. So this is just this image that we have down here, that basically, gives us some type of animation. So loaders, so users have more patience while things are loading, but notice that these are kind of both set to display equals none. So now when we're running the code, the first thing that we're going to do, is we're going to basically show just the, div that has that image inside of it. Now, the trick is that as the report loads, you're going to call Power BI embed, and that's going to start the loading process. All the while, you basically are showing, the div, but you're hiding the report container. And so then what we're going to do, and let me kind of point out this bottom piece of code right here, is we're going to handle an event on that Power BI report called the loaded event. And the idea is while it's loading, you are showing something, but when the report is finally loaded, you want to show the div, which is the report container. So we'll hide one and show the other. And that's basically, how you get that particular effect right here. Once again, if we go back over here and we kind of show things, how do they look inside here? You can see how it looks just in the regular shim page. And once again, let's kind of go back over now into Salesforce. Let's go ahead and look at our visual force pages. And, inside of our visual source pages, okay, now I need to give Salesforce for mutual authentication, 13931. Okay, verify. Okay, so, what I want to show here is if I go to custom embed one, and let's kind of go ahead and look at it. This is very much like, what we've done with secure embed. It's just we're pointing to our own single page application. And once again, that application, has the things that we need, to be able to authenticate. If we go to the custom embed page right here, and now things are moving along. And, now here is my Salesforce, embedding page. Now, going a little bit further here, let's say that the next thing that I want to do, is show the bookmarks pane. And what you can see is it's pretty simple, with respect to, as you're creating the configuration, I just say bookmarks, visible equals true. And, once we've done that inside here, let's go back to this second page right here. So custom embed number 2. And now I have the bookmarks pane. Also note that in this example, if we have bookmarks, we might just want to hide navigation altogether, because we've supplied bookmarks, for someone to navigate between pages and, to apply, different types, of filtering and things inside here. So once again, if you have talented Power BI report authors who are really good at creating bookmarks that are intuitive for users, you might just want to go ahead and show them. Okay, let's keep going. That's example number 2. So now we're going to take another step, and this is something that is available with, with basically user owns data embedding. That's not available with app owns data embedding. Personal bookmarks enabled. So all you really have to do, is throw this one particular switch right here. Let's go ahead and move over to custom embedding 3. And so what you're going to see is that now you provided the personal bookmarks pane. So maybe a user, wants to see, what was the Western region, in 2018. And so, maybe also let's go ahead and switch this over to date. And now under personal bookmarks, this user now, has a favorite. And, the idea is that, now that user can kind of move, between different, states of the report that they like. So once again, just adding, the personalized bookmarks part, works fine when you're using user owns data and you're using this technique. Okay, 2 more things to show before we move on to the final topic. Enabling persistent filters. So not only can you enable personal bookmarks, but over here, what you've seen here is that now we've got this other setting, persistent filters enabled. And the big benefit of this is that one of the things that we're able to do is remember what the user was doing the last time we saw this report. So for instance, let's go to this particular report. And here, I think I'll also going to open the console so we can kind of see, what my code might be doing here. And so, let's say they switch, they've done something else inside there. And the idea is, let's say you go to these settings, and so now this user, goes somewhere else. And let's now go back to that one particular place, and what we should see, is that, it remembered, what the settings were. So the way that's going to work is that when you enable persistent filters, you can then call report save persistent filters. And the idea is the next time that report, gets opened, it will open with those persistent filters. And here, I've tried to do something where you capture an event. So anytime someone changes a slicer or applies a bookmark, we're just going to go ahead and run the code to persist the filter. Now, the final thing we're going to see is adding something, which is the action bar. So back here, here is number 4, and this is everything except for the action bar. So now let's go here and add, the action bar in. And so what you can see here is the action bar. Gosh, that looks a lot like if I just went back and opened, that report in the Power BI service. And when I finally get to this report, what we can see is that there's this file menu, there's this export menu. And so over here, you can see that if I decide to, enable the action bar, once again, if I look down here, you kind of see that there is a place for you to say bars, action bar, visible equals true. And so now, there's nice features like you can allow the user just to export a PDF file, go to analyze in Excel, export to PowerPoint. One thing to keep in mind is that the action bar is an all or nothing proposition. You can't bring selected parts, so you do have to, show it with things like chat in Teams and, some other things over here, that are going to be inside there. But once again, many people will find the action bar very valuable. Okay, so now we've kind of been through the easier solution, where basically we were trying to keep things simple. We're using user owns data embedding, and we were able to do everything with a single page application. And we didn't ever have to talk to the IT department to configure Salesforce for our needs. You know, if I'm able to kind of stand up that Azure AD application, things just work. So now we're going to shift gears and go to something much more complicated. So the last solution that we're going to look at is based on the modern Salesforce developer platform, which is called the Salesforce Developer Experience. You know, here, if I go to this one particular URL right here, if I can somehow click on that, and that's not what I meant to do. Okay, well, the Salesforce Developer Experience, that is having trouble using PowerPoint. How can I just click on this and go to this URL right here? You know, but what you can see is that Salesforce has put a ton, you know, of energy and effort into creating a very good developer experience. And what we can see here is that when you use the Salesforce Developer Experience, they give you a CLI, you know, so command line interface, you know, so you can just fire up Node.js and type in commands if you want. There's also great developer extensions for Visual Studio Code. And when you go and read the Salesforce Developer Experience documentation, they will tell you their preferred development environment is Visual Studio Code. Now, this is not something that you get up to speed on in a weekend. You know, Salesforce Developer Experience is something that, you know, after 6 months to a year, you get good. You know, after 2 or 3 years, you know, you're going to be better. So, you know, it does require a pretty big developer effort if you're just getting started. Now, what we're going to use in my example is 3 different types of Sfdx components. We're going to use Apex classes, which is how you write server-side code. And then there's also Aura components, and then the more modern Lightning Web components. Now, what's going to happen is that you're going to first of all install the Salesforce command line interface, or CLI. There's some installation instructions for you. And then afterwards, you know, let's go over to Visual Studio Code right now. And so, you know, what I want to do here is if I go to extensions, there are lots of Salesforce extensions, but you really just want to take the Salesforce extension pack and install that, and that installs all these other different extensions inside there. Now, next thing we're going to look at is that there is going to be command line interface commands. And so if I'm in Visual Studio Code, you know, let's go ahead and start that up. And so, you know, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a Control-Shift-P, because what that's going to do is it's going to bring up the different commands, and we can see that these Salesforce Sfdx commands are included. So let's say I want to create a new project. It takes a little bit of time, you know, so when you go ahead and do that, you might think that it's not working. Just give it another minute, because quite often it has to load a bunch of code, you know, including the Java runtime below, you know. But what should happen is it should come back. What kind of project do I want to create? I want to create a, you know, empty project. What is the name of your project? You know, Ted's project. Not very original. You know, where do you want to, you know, load this? You know, so if down here I go into, you know, where I'm adding my other Salesforce, you know, development projects inside here, you know, now it creates this project. And what you can see, you know, is it kind of gives you this starting point right here. And now I can do other things, you know, such as, you know, Sfdx. And so now, you know, I can do things like create Apex classes, you know, create different Aura components. So now I'm going to switch over, you know, to the project, which is our developer sample. Now, when you start using the Salesforce Developer Experience and you know, create projects, they have a certain project structure. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to create server-side code that lives in what we call an Apex class. So under the classes folder in force-app main default, what we're going to see here is, let's go to classes. Let's go ahead and open that up. And there's kind of the server-side code. It's very much like C#. It's got some neat things that C# doesn't have. And it's a whole programming language, where there's lots of references, but like Salesforce or like C# and Java, it supports most of the same object-oriented concepts, and then has, things like if you want to have a server-side method that we can call from across the network, they also have things like attributes that allow you to, turn a server-side method into something that's automatically remotable, to client-side components. Now, there's two types of UI components. There are what we call Aura components or Aura Lightning components, which were introduced quite a few years back. And then Salesforce also introduced an update, a second type called a Lightning Web Component. So companies that use Sfdx are kind of split. There's plenty that still use Aura components and haven't moved to Lightning Web Components because they're a little new. Lightning Web Components have a lot of neat advantages as well. So as you're, creating the server-side code and then the client-side component, you really can choose between Lightning Aura components and Lightning Web Components. Now, here's the big picture. You have this class, and it's the Apex controller class, and so it is the Power BI Embed Manager. Now, this is going to do a lot of server-side calls to Azure AD, and also to the Power BI REST API. And so some of the things, that we have to do, is figure out how to make HTTP requests in Apex code, how to do things like set headers, also how to serialize JSON back and forth between Apex objects. And, you can see that here, one of the things that we're going to do, is we're going to have to call to Azure AD and, basically get a app only access token. So I have a class that helps kind of create the body of the request and deal with the response coming back. Now, going a little bit further here, what we need to do to set this project up is to add several different settings into our Salesforce environment. So if you haven't done it, you can create a Salesforce developer account, which will give you an environment where you can play with these different things. But these are also things that are going to have to be configured, as you push the app out into production. So adding remote site settings, we have to create an Azure AD application so that we can call the Power BI REST API as a service principal. And we're going to do two more things. We're going to create a custom metadata type. So somewhere in Salesforce, we can store our client credentials so we can authenticate as a service principal. And then finally, I need to have Power BI.js, that JavaScript library, available in an Aura component, or a Lightning Web Component. So we have to basically upload that, into our Salesforce environment as a static resource. Now, as far as remote site settings go, let's say that I quickly go back here to Salesforce. And let's go to the main Salesforce setup page. So if you want to kind of get the sample up and going, and we look for remote site, and there's remote site settings. And you can see that remote site settings, the idea is that you need to put a base URL. If your server-side Apex code wants to make a web API call, it can't do that unless your URL, at least the base URL, is registered under remote site settings. So we have two. One is to be able to call to Azure AD and get an access token, and the other is to call to the Power BI REST API. Okay, now in addition to that, when we get our access token, we go through something called the client credential flow. And the idea is that you're going to have to create an application, and your application is going to have certain things it needs, to be able to authenticate. If I go back over here, and now one more time, let's go to here, and I'm going to, sign in as this particular user. And there's really not that much you have to do to create the app. So let's say that I have a app for app owns data embedding. So we're going to create this app. We're going to leave it at web, and we actually are going to leave this blank, because when you authenticate as a service principal, there's never a redirect URL involved. So now we go ahead and we register the app. Now, what you're going to need to do, to configure things is that, you're going to need to have the tenant ID and the app, or what we call the, client ID. And so just by creating this, here is the tenant ID. I'm going to grab that. There is my tenant ID. There is my application or client ID. And we're going to add that. And then the last thing I need is something called a app secret. And the idea of the app secret is you need a password. And so if I go back to my app, and over here under certificates and secrets, and here's client secrets, we're going to create a new client secret. Think of it as just you're adding a password. So this is secret 1. And whenever you create one of these, you have to give it a certain duration. And once I create this, I can go ahead, copy that to the clipboard, and so now, I've created the app, and the app has the things it needs to be able to authenticate. Now, when you talk to the Power BI REST API as a service principal, it goes a little bit further than that. So just to quickly kind of cover the other things that you're going to need to do is we're going to go into groups, and notice that I have this group, which is the Power BI apps. And so inside here, what you can see is that anytime you create an Azure AD app that's going to be used as service principal, you put that in here. And then finally, one final step, and here's where you need to configure tenant level settings in Power BI. Over in Power BI, I'm going to go to the admin portal. In the admin portal, under tenant settings, what you're going to see here is that if we go down to the developer settings, there allows service principals to use the Power BI APIs. So ultimately, we configure this with a group, and any Azure AD app that you want, needs to be, in that particular group. Okay. And then just because you've gone through all these steps doesn't mean your service principal can yet talk to a particular workspace. And so the final piece there, is that you're going to have to, then, make sure the app, gets added, to whatever particular workspace, that you are using. Okay, so there's quite a few things to set that up. But at the end of the day, your code needs access, to 3 pieces of data. So those pieces of data are the client ID, the tenant ID, and that app secret. Now, in Salesforce, there's lots of ways that you can track credentials. They have something called name credentials, which is great for user credentials. What I like to do with service principal credentials is to create something called a custom metadata type. And the idea is you get to kind of create your own custom table schema. And so I've created a custom metadata type, and note that I can add whatever fields I want. So I've added client ID, client secret, and tenant ID. Also note, let me go back a page, that when you create a custom metadata type, they automatically take your name and then they create a programmatic name that has __ MDT. And then when you create the columns, you're going to have to identify them programmatically. So whatever name you gave them, it's going to be that name plus __ C. Now, once you've created the custom metadata type, you have to create an instance of it. So there's also a way to kind of go through, and add a new record for your custom metadata type. And so here's kind of the example where you have a custom metadata type, and now you're going to create an instance, and you're going to put in that, customer ID, client secret, and tenant ID. And note that when you created it, you gave it a name. And so now let's look at the code that's in Apex, which can go through and basically find the type called get instance, and once again, you're kind of matching that up to this name right here. And once you've done that work, then you're going to be able to kind of harvest, the credentials that you need. Now, you've seen this. Let's kind of look at the code, that we're going to use to get an access token. So here we are able to kind of get these credentials. Okay, now we have to basically set up an HTTP request the Apex way. So we go ahead, create a new HTTP request. We have to set things. It's going to be a post. What is my endpoint? Here you can kind of see that the endpoint, you have to take that client ID, the tenant ID, and paste it inside there. But now we're going to be able to make a request, and get back an access token. Now, once we've done that, I now want to just spend, we're kind of running out of time, so I want to kind of jump into this class and kind of take a look at, and if I come back, up top here, and, we look at this, not that, but down here, we're going to, basically get the access token. So here is effectively what we're going to do to get the data we need to pass back to the browser. So once again, I have to create an HTTP request, and I'm going to call out, and we need the workspace ID and report ID. This allows me to do a call, which gets metadata about a report. And in particular, what you're going to see with AppOwn's data embedding is that if you have the report ID, you're going to need one more piece of information, which is the dataset ID. And so here you can kind of see that we call the Power BI REST API, and we're able to get things like the ID of the report type. So is it a Power BI interactive report versus a paginated report? I can get its embed URL, which I'm going to need, and the dataset ID. Now, when we're using AppOwn's data embedding, we have to create something which is called an embed token. So here's kind of the example of how we would parse together another URL that has the report ID and embed token. And then we're going to be able to kind of call out to that, and get the embed token. Now, all of this is going to return back, to the user. And the idea is I've created my own custom type here, Power BI report. So the Apex code runs, and it runs because an Aura component or a Lightning Web component made a call to get embedding data for a report. And so what we can do is we can simply create an instance, of this Power BI report class, fill it up, and that's the data. And what's kind of nice about working with Apex and Sfdx is I just kind of create the object, and it takes care, of passing that back. So here you can kind of see that I just created this object, I fill in the details, and now we pass it back, to the client tier. Now, let's look at the Aura component. So we don't have much time, so I'm not going to be able to do too deep dive, into a Aura component, but what you'll see here is that what's going to happen when we load this component in. So let's go back here, and, what I'm going to do is, let's go back to Salesforce and the Lightning App Builder, and I'm going to go into edit right here. So what you'll see here is that my solution has two components, the Power BI report, which is the Lightning Web component, and the Aura component. Now, when you add this component to a page, we've kind of set things up so that you have to configure it with a workspace ID and a report ID. And the idea here is that what we, are going to be able to do, let me move past this slide right here, is that the Aura component we don't want it to be hard coded to one particular report. So instead, we allow you to kind of create as many instances of the Aura component, each configured with its own workspace ID, report ID. It's able to send that data over to the Apex class, which then gets the embedding data, which includes the embed URL, and the embed token, and we pass that back, to the Aura component. And that kind of completes the picture here. And, the idea would be, let's make sure I have my cheater file right here. So if we now, decide we go to the Lightning app builder, and I want to create a new Lightning app, and let's go ahead, and create this app page, Ted's Lightning app page. And so, as we create this, I get to decide, what do I want things to look like, main region and, custom sidebar. There's different custom ones that we could have inside there, but now let's go ahead. And the idea is that I pushed my components out, into this environment. So either I take the Lightning web component or the Aura component, I want to add it, in place right here. And I have code that basically just gives a little message until you configure it with the right things inside here. And now we're able to, basically take the workspace ID, and we're able to, take the report ID as well, and add those pieces in. And now, let's go ahead and save. And then there's the business of, activating this page so it becomes, available to users. And, now that you've added this, into the, navigation menu, we should be able to get to that. And, if I kind of look at, what does the example Aura component look like, as I bring it up? What does the, the Lightning web component, look like, when I bring it up? Kind of the same thing. Now, we just got to the end of our time, so I just was able to kind of get to the tip of an iceberg here, but as you use app owns data embedding, there's this whole world of using things like row level security and having different sets of permissions that you apply to individual users. So being able to get your access tokens and being able to, have your Apex code call to the Power BI REST API, to accomplish any of the aspects of app owns data embedding that you need, is something that, you are able to do. Okay, so I think we're at time right here. So what we were able to do is kind of go through and look at, from very, very simple, just using secure embed features, to kind of do no development. We looked at the SPA shim with user owns data embedding, which gave us a relatively easy way to get a lot of customization options and not to have to work, with the IT department to add configurations to our Salesforce environment they might not be willing to do. And then the last thing we looked at, even though we didn't get to dive too deep into it, was you can embrace professional development in Salesforce with the Salesforce Developer Experience, and create, very robust solutions that, support, all the different, types of DevOps and CI/CD, deployment, that, would be mainstream with enterprise level projects, or a custom piece of software an ISV would make, to basically create custom solutions for Salesforce that they deliver to, many different customers. So with that, Daniel, did we get any questions in?
Yeah, we did. Thanks. I know we're running into overtime, but I just wanted to pass along Kenny's question. Kenny said, we don't use DX. Is it possible to get a sample project that is based on a typical sandbox setup in Salesforce for the app owns data, the app owned version, please?
I can't commit to writing, those type of samples. So, I think there is, ways to, write server-side code in the older model, but it would be the same thing where you're setting up, HTTP requests. You're going to have to go through client credentials flow and get a token. I don't see why you couldn't do the same type of things, but I know that we don't have anything planned to kind of go back and use the older model to provide developer samples. if it's something that you want to work towards that, you can reach out to me, ted.pattison@microsoft.com, and I try my best to kind of help you, get through those.
Thanks for this session on developing in Salesforce with Power BI embedding, and really appreciate it. I wanted to remind everyone, I just put a link in the chat as far as watching past Power BI Dev Camp recordings on the Power BI community. So I would encourage everyone to check that out at community.powerbi.com, and the link is in the chat, as well as other recordings will be available. This particular one will be available in about a week's time in the community and on YouTube, so please check that out. Ted, any final thoughts?
Well, thank you for your help today, Daniel.
Sure, my pleasure.
And, well, I guess I could plug next month. We have another teammate of mine from the Power BI Customer Advisory Team, Scott Sewell, and he's going to be working with Power BI solutions on top of the Dataverse. So anyone using Power Apps, Dynamics 365, and wanting to integrate Power BI, reporting, into their world, it's going to be a really good drill down session. Scott has some really great demos that he'll be showing.
Sounds fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Ted, and have a good rest of your day. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.